CNBC Business News, Chicago.
Software provider Assaia says technology has helped airlines reduce delays and turnaround time for planes this year, even as passenger numbers rise. Christiaan Hen is the CEO of Assaia and joins us now. Thank you so much for your time. So I'm looking at the report that you put out. Ground delays, thanks to your technology, have been reduced by 6%. Turnaround times have been lowered by 4% in the last 12 months. How can technology help here? What's the secret?
Yeah, so what we really see is that the airlines and the airports, they're kind of faced with the challenge of capacity. Airports have been pausing investments into infrastructure during the COVID years, and airlines are obviously facing some supply chain issues, even though the demand is really high. And these kind of technologies, they help airports and airlines getting real-time visibility on what's actually going on in their operation at this very moment. And that data also helps them to predict what's actually going to happen a few hours down the road, which obviously helps them to make proactive decisions about how to avoid certain unwanted situations.
So that technology that you're talking about, is it the big buzzword? Is it AI or is it simple old technology? What is it?
I would say it's a combination. I mean, airports especially traditionally have been infrastructure companies that try to solve problems by building additional infrastructure. But more and more we're seeing that they're turning towards technology to face the discrepancy between supply and demand in terms of their infrastructure. And it's not just AI technologies, but they obviously do play a big role in the total mix of solutions that are being invested in.
You know, Christiaan, I do wonder, can this technology, can it actually help demystify one of the biggest mysteries of air travel, and that is how you board a plane correctly and how that, you know, is most efficient, how you deboard the plane most correctly, because apparently it does say a lot about our characters as well, and it slows down the airplane and the turnaround. Can it?
That's a really good question, and I believe it can. And there's a lot of different opinions on what's the best way to board an aircraft. But I think it's a classic example where typically these sort of opinions come from observations and best practices. Even they should be coming from big data analysis. So in order to have a data-driven outcome on the question on demystifying how to board an aircraft, we first need to gather the data on how is boarding actually happening. And AI technologies can actually help with automating the data capture, which means that the data quality is much better than manually collected data. And we're not just getting it for a few departures, but we're basically getting it for all departures. And once we have all this data collected, then we can analyze that and we can use AI technology to basically find the most optimal outcome for sure.
I think what my colleague is saying is she's fed up with people from Group 5 trying to jump into Group 2 and chance their arm. I think that's where we're going.
Is that airlines in general, they're facing challenges because the demand for air travel is super high. They're under a lot of pressure to basically deliver their product and with a limited number of resources. And that goes both to number of aircraft that they're having, but also staff shortages, which are not making things easier. So it's definitely a challenging situation across the block. And that's also where these airlines are investing in technology solutions to help them solve those issues.
But I don't know if that goes far enough, Christiaan. When I travel on one of the low-cost carriers, I don't always enjoy the experience, but I know more likely than not that I'm going to get on that plane a damn sight quicker, and they're going to get me up in the air a lot quicker, and they're going to have the turnaround a lot quicker, even when the plane's late. Are the national flag carriers actually just so obsessed with long haul that they're willing to actually let short haul go by the by somewhat?
I don't necessarily agree to that because, for these flag carriers, the short haul is a crucial component to the long haul product as well. As these short haul flights are feeding passengers into the long haul destinations, it's critical, within the hub and spoke system that the short haul product, works as good as it can, because otherwise it is inherently directly impacting the long haul product as well.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying about hub and spoke, and I kind of anticipate that'd be part of the answer. Tell me about the complicated relationship between the airport operators and the airlines themselves. So many times, and you would have seen it more times in your career than I've ever seen in my life, is when something goes wrong, the blame game starts, and it's the operators blaming the airlines blaming the operators as well. Is that relationship Well, actually, no, let me ask a different question. What's the best in class in that kind of relationship? Who's getting it right? Is there a hub and spoke or an airport that you think this is where they've absolutely nailed that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I have seen many cases where, airports and airlines do not always align. I do think they sort of recognize the same problem. So even this capacity crunch that we've been talking about is something that, even ACI and IATA sort of equally acknowledge, but they have different views on how to solve that. And I think from our experience working with, airport and airline customers, we see that if they come together, which around a product like ours they typically do, they can really, achieve remarkable outcomes. Because in the end of the day, the nature of the industry is that they're super interconnected. And obviously, very often cases, what's good for one is actually good for the other as well. So yeah, we absolutely see the need for them to work together. And we also see that they can achieve remarkable outcomes on doing so.
Christiaan, final question to you. There seems to be a big difference between how the gates are operated between the U.S. and Europe. And Europe has a better capacity here. It works more efficiently here, but the delays are longer. What's the difference here?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting finding that we had over the past few years, where there is a difference model. And we see that the gate capacity is being used more efficiently in Europe because there's no airline-owned infrastructure, so there's more flexibility. But on the other hand, that means there's more interdependencies, right? And in practice, we see that in the European model, that means that there's slightly worse performance in terms of getting flights out on time. Whereas in the US, that performance is better, but it does come at the cost of a sort of a lower infrastructure utilization rates because each has their own infrastructure.
Christiaan, hands down, the best airport, in my view, in Europe, Zurich. What's your favorite one?
I got a weak spot for Schiphol, but that's just because it's my home airport.
Ah, you're biased.
Yeah, I am.
Well, you're both doing the bias. How can you...
No. Zurich is very close to the city center.
Yeah.
Hardly any delays. Yeah. Everything works beautifully.
Yeah. Not Luton?
No. Gatwick? No.
Oh, we should let Christiaan go. Sorry, Christiaan. Lovely to see. Thanks for the stimulating conversations there. Christiaan Hen is the CEO of Assaia. No, not Luton Airport? Not your favourite?
Not necessarily. Haven't flown out of there in a very long time. But Zurich, did you know, have I reminded you lately that I'm flying back to Zurich and starting my holiday, my well-deserved holiday, in about 18 minutes? Are you working next week, Steve? He's not even talking to me anymore. This is not going well for me or for him.
And the week after. And the week after that.
Should we talk about wine instead?
No, because the person who did this package is sunning herself in New South Wales.
Well, she deserves it. She too.
Working with me, you mean?
Okay, it is only 8:43 here in London, but let's talk about some typical. Global wine production has plummeted to its lowest level since 1961 as a cocktail of inflation, climate change, and lowering wine consumption shakes up the industry. That's according to the International Organization of Vine and Wine, but several consumer trends seem to be keeping the sector afloat. Karen Cho has more on this story.
For many, the holiday festivities are marked by